Hey guys, Sly here, and before we get into this video, I just want to let you guys know that this is actually a re-upload of a part of a series that I do on my Twitch channel called the Sly Army Tier Lists, where we pretty much rank a bunch of just random topics that I'm personally interested in. And so, because of that, these opinions are not set in stone for how I feel about in the current day. And so if you guys want a more updated version of that, feel free to either check out the DeviantArt link down below or tune in on my Twitch that will also be in the description, or check out my Discord where I occasionally post some more updated versions of how I feel about certain topics. And so do keep that in mind. And also make sure to check out the description of the video itself for the timestamps for the particular topic that is presented here. But in any event, I hope you guys do at least enjoy. I recommend you guys listen to this as either like a podcast form or as just something to play in the background. But in any event, hope you guys at least enjoy. Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Sly Army Tier Lists. So it has been a hot minute since we've actually done like a legit one, because, well, the last one we did, we actually kind of looked online to see if there was any, but rest assured, I am going to make sure that I'm going to go back to these normal lists. So as far as actual genuine tier lists that I make, we'll be making sure that I'll be going back to those. Now, that being said, because of the new show that we're doing with the Caspian Awards, that might mean that we could, well, I mean, we've always done like at least one a month, but that might mean that as far as doing the tier lists go, it may not necessarily be consistent with it being able to be a monthly thing, because I do so much research on the Game Awards for pretty much like every single week, and because of just how much I'm doing with that, that might start kind of hindering the tier lists now. So I do want to give you guys a bit of a heads up in that regard, that I will still be doing the tier lists, but at least as of now, don't expect there to be like a massive list, at least not until like maybe the end of the summer. So we're just going to be kind of doing these more low-key tier lists, which I hope you guys are at least fine with that. And also it'll be a much shorter length of time for me to be able to actually do tier lists like this anyways. So, but in any event, so this is, I think, episode 40 if I'm not mistaken. And, well, I'm kind of surprised we haven't done this up until now, but we're going to finally take the time to rank the Far Cry games. So, now, there's probably some of you guys who are curious, what's Far Cry? Like, I've heard the name, I've heard a lot of people really like quite a few of the games, but then I've heard some of the more recent games have kind of sucked. Well, Far Cry, for those who don't know, is an open, or most of them are open world games. There's a few exceptions, but it's mostly open world first person shooters. It's basically an anthology series where you basically follow a dude or chick, if you're going by like the newer games, and you're pretty much thrown into like basically in a scenario where you have to face, against all odds in a survival situation. Or at least that's kind of the common theme that's linked between all of the games. Because again, this is an anthology series, so you don't have to worry about whether or not, if you need to play Far Cry 2 for you to understand Far Cry 5, that's thankfully not how it works. This isn't like something like Assassin's Creed or what's another good example? But yeah, or like Kingdom Hearts or Zelda or Metal Gear Solid. It's not anything like that. You can pretty much play any of the games and you're pretty much good like from there. And truth be told, this is a series that, yeah, I've only like played a couple of the games for you guys on stream, but it actually is a series that I actually really like, because I don't typically stream a lot of open world games. Quite literally, the last time I remember streaming one was last year with Far Cry 2, which obviously we'll get to that. But as far as like, this style of game, I actually really do enjoy. And it is a franchise that I just kind of wish I was able to like fully stream for you guys more often. But let's just say that, granted, I've been harping about this for the past couple of months now, but my computer unfortunately is a piece of shit. It's from, I think, well, we got it in 2018, but it's a 7-year-old model because it's a 2017 model. So unfortunately, I can't really stream too many of the games for you guys, because if I try to stream any like open world game from like post 2012, it will actually lag the shit out of my computer, and that sucks because there's so many good games in this series, man. Like, and I know some people are like, "Oh, well, why don't you just play it on console?" I'm trying to transition away from console now, but because admittedly, I just prefer being able to play on PC because of just the amount of mod support, but also just the graphical fidelity is typically better on PC than it is on console anyways. And admittedly, if there is like a bullshit part of the game, I'd rather be able to have like an easy access to that. But regardless of all of that though, as far as I'm concerned, Far Cry is definitely a series that I think is still pretty cool. Granted, it definitely had its low points, and believe me, it had some low points. But as far as like, you know, being called Elder Scrolls but with guns, I could definitely, see that comparison, especially with a few of these games being as popular as, some of the other big open world games of their time, like Elder Scrolls or like Fallout or like GTA and stuff like that. So, and well, you can't deny that for the most part, this series rides and dies with its villains and antagonists. That is something that you cannot deny is something that Far Cry is best known for. Foss in Far Cry 3, Pagan Min in Far Cry 4, Anton Castillo in Far Cry 6, and I'll even throw in the Jackal from Far Cry 2. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, Far Cry, like, is, well, mostly has been able to pretty much get their villains right. There are some exceptions, but we'll get to those. But that being said, I don't really have too many stipulations as far as, rules. We pretty much have every single Far Cry game on the tier list. The only ones I'm not going to be ranking is Instincts Predator and Vengeance, because they're basically just ports of the original PC version of Far Cry 1. And so, like, I mean, there's differences, but it's like, yeah, and well, I just straight up haven't played them. I own Instincts Predator on the 360, but I haven't played it yet. But, well, it's partially because of the game that's tied to, which of course we'll get into a second. But yeah, as far and yes, I have pretty much played every single, like all the other ones, at least for a decent amount of time. I have at least 4 to 6 hours of gameplay in every single one of these games. Which, keep in mind, the main story of all these games is around, like, typically is close to like 10 to 20 hours depending on the game. So I'd say that's at least a decent amount of time. I'm not one of those people who's like, you have to play the entire game in order for you to rank. No, I don't have time. And, well, most people probably will just pick up and just play at their own pace anyways. So it's like, yeah, because again, these are open world single player games. So it's like, well, mostly. We'll get to Far Cry 1. Trust me, I know. Yeah. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a good enough time. And of course, we're just going to be basing it off of just gameplay, the story, the side activities, all that fun stuff. You guys know how these tier lists work. So as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the only criteria. Especially since, like I said, this is pretty much it. And again, keep in mind, this is all just my personal opinion. If you guys disagree with me, that's completely fine. Just let me know down in the comments below, and we'll pretty much go from there. I will say one more thing, though. Yes, we have talked about plenty of these games before in the past, and if you guys have seen some of our previous tier lists, you already know how I feel about certain games here. So I guess I just wanted to take this as an opportunity for me to be able to just kind of gather all the games up now and explain my thoughts in a more, recent thing, because it has been a couple of years since I've talked about some of these games. And as you can see, we've got 4 tiers this time. We have the Voss tier, which is pretty much just my personal favorite games. Then we have Pagan Min, which is like pretty good games. Not my favorites, but still pretty good. And then Anton, which is like, this game has some problems. Like, it's not terrible, but yeah. And then we've got Joseph Seed. So pretty much all the games that, you guessed it,
Not good.
Yeah, you guessed it, not good. So, but yeah, I think that's all I really need to say, and we're gonna do these in chronological order, and we'll pretty much go from there. Which means we are starting with, of course, Far Cry 1. Oh god. Okay. Okay. So, Far Cry 1 is a weird game to talk about. Because, well, it's the first game. But it's also the only game that was made by Crytek, which, if you guys know, Crytek eventually made the Crysis games, as well as Hunt Showdown, which I respect the hell out of Crysis 1 and Hunt Showdown. And this was their first game. And to this game's credit, I will say that as far as like some of the technical achievements that it was able to achieve, like the foliage and stuff like that, I can respect. That being said, even for its time, I frankly do think that this game is
It's not good.
You guys already know, if you guys have pretty much seen some of our other tier lists before, I really don't like this game. I'm putting this one in Joseph. Yeah, okay. I think I really need to go in depth with this one, because here's the thing. Even for its time, I do think that this game not only wasn't really all that groundbreaking, but honestly was not that good to begin with. Because this game basically was trying to do a lot of the things that other games are doing at the time. Like Halo Combat Evolved pretty much showcased, and Serious Sam, pretty much both those games pretty much showcased that you can have massive, open areas for you to be able to, enjoy in a first-person setting. And, well, let's just say that there's certain mechanics in this game that completely break the experience to the point where it's actually more infuriating than enjoyable to play. First problem. This game... first problem. And it's something that you immediately notice off the bat. The shooting kind of sucks, even compared to other games that came around 2004. Because keep in mind that obviously Half-Life 2 would eventually come out later that year, but I'm not even going to make that comparison. I'm going to make the comparison between this as well as something like, Serious Sam, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Halo Combat Evolved, all of which have better shooting mechanics, and those games came out 3 years prior. So, because the way in which the bullets are done in this game is that they're pseudo hits. They're not hit scan. They're pseudo projectile based. And well, that gets extremely infuriating when it comes to how the damage output works. Which, speaking of the damage output, this game, even on the easiest difficulty, plays really wants. This game, even on the easiest difficulties, really wants to be a tactical shooter. Problem is that this game, its level design is that of literally a quasi open world experience, which, compared to something like Ghost Recon, which is another game that came out 3 years prior, it just doesn't work because of the way in which the sprint mechanics work and the way in which the armor system works. Because the armor system is the same as this is in Doom 3, where you take more hits with whenever you get shot with armor than you do with the armor taking in the hits, which is something that is completely bullshit. Which, speaking of bullshit, this is something that I actually explicitly remember from my first playthrough of this game, not 8 years, 6, 7 years ago. The AI will literally see you from miles away. I kid you not. I remember the first time I played this. Now, to be fair, I think this was something that, from what I researched, was something that was added through a stupid, patch. But in the current version, if you buy this on Steam or GOG, the AI will literally see you from fucking miles away. Because this game has a shitty stealth mechanic, by the way. And they will snipe your ass, snipe your ass, even if they're not using a sniper. If they're using an M4 or an MP5 or just any small range weapon, they will see you and fucking snipe your ass. Which is the most bullshit thing I've ever experienced in any fucking game. It pissed me off. You have no idea how much that pissed me the fuck off. Not to mention that, even just kind of besides all that stuff, if I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't really help that, in the second half of the game, which I'm gonna spoil this, by the way, because this is just straight up a not good game that held up very poorly in the past 20 years. Basically, the shtick with this game is that, the main antagonist is a guy named Dr. Krieger, who is basically created a virus that mutates anyone who's infected with it, and they become something called a Trigent, which is basically just a mutant. These Trigents are the actual bane of my existence. They are some of the worst enemies I've encountered in any video game. And what makes it worse is that there's certain ones that can cloak, but they're literally invisible to the point where you cannot see them even when they're shooting at you. Halo, I keep comparing this to Halo, by the way. I am well aware of that, but I feel like that's probably the best comparison here. But, in Halo, when there are the elites that have the cloaking device, they're in active camo, right? You can still see the outline of them when they're walking around, which makes it pretty easy to spot. Granted, they're still kind of difficult because it's transparent, but you can still at least have that fair challenge of being able to spot where the enemy is. You don't have that in Far Cry 1. They are actually invisible. You can't see shit. You can't see an outline. You can't see a bullet trace. You can't see shit. And they are the dumbest enemies I've seen in any game. Dumb as in they're bullshit. It also does, so yeah, terrible fucking, terrible fucking shooting. Bullshittingly frustrating AI, even on the easiest difficulties. You dying super fast. What else is a problem with this game? Oh yeah, the story straight up sucks. Granted, I don't want to defend this game because it's even by 2004, they should have had a little bit more effort with the story because again, you're fighting Dr. Krieger, but he's literally like the worst antagonist ever. He has so little charisma that he basically has anti-charisma. He is that goddamn like infuriatingly boring. And it doesn't help that like the other characters are written as if like they're in some sort of like weird 70s porno film. Like it's really hard to describe without like showcasing you like footage, but frankly it's actually terrible. Like I mean, this sound clip that I had for like 3 years,
stupid bastard, stupid bastard,
that pretty much sums up the entire game right there. And again, like I said with the first with our Hitman tier list, I usually don't like picking on the first game because it is the first game in the series. And you have to be a bit more forgiving. However, there are certain moments where you have to call out the bullshit and say that, yeah, no, this game sucks. And guess what? Far Cry 1 sucks. It just does. So, like, I don't understand motherfuckers who defend this game. Because I've seen, like, several YouTubers say that this game is still good. What are you smoking? This game's ass. Even for 2004, there were better games, better first-person shooter games, better quasi-open world shooter games that came out before this, and especially in that same year. Which, yes, that is another thing with this game. This is the only non-open world game in the series. And, well, that's probably for the better. So, and last but not least, if I'm going to be honest, like, I know some people said that, like, I know there's some people who defend this game praising, like, its graphical fidelity. Even I have to say, straight up say, even I have to, like, you know, question that a little bit, because there were other games that came out before then that did jungle settings pretty decently. Like, and this might be a bit of a stretch for some people, but like Medal of Honor Pacific, or not Pacific, Rising Sun came out a couple months beforehand. And while there are some moments that do look pretty dull in that game, specifically the Guadalcanal missions in that, I would honestly say that like when you're in the daytime, in the jungles in that game, because it's a World War II Pacific Theater game for context, for those who don't know, honestly, that game looks beautiful in certain sections, like in the daytime jungle, which is a lot of the point in this game too. And that game was on console. That was on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. So for a game that came out on a console, having jungle sections looking better than this, that's embarrassing. So as far as I'm concerned, this game barely has any defense of being as annoyingly stupid as it is. So this easily earns the jokes. If I'm gonna be honest, as much as you guys want to shit on the newer games, you know, like Far Cry New Dawn or Far Cry 6 or hell even Far Cry 5, let it be known that while yes, those games have their problems, this is the worst game in the series, which actually is a good thing. I'd rather have a franchise start off with its worst game rather than end on its worst, because at least it shows that the franchise improved. But basically what I'm trying to say is don't fucking play this game. It has no redeeming values in any direction. Game, like, you know, gunplay, level design, enemy variety, hell, even the weapons barely work half the time. And its story is the actual worst. Don't fucking play this game. I swear to God. I actually felt nothing but pain playing through this. It was that bad. So, whatever. If I do eventually play Instinct's Predator, I'm hoping that game is infinitely better than the first game. I'm really hoping about that. I'm really hoping that's the case, excuse me. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the sequel, Far Cry 2. Came out in 2008, 4 years after Far Cry 1. And like I said, this is not made by Crytek. All these other games have no association with Crytek, not even using the Cry engine. This is the first game to use the Dunia engine. And, well, if you guys watched my playthrough from last year of the entire game, including all of the scavenging for the like the Jackal tapes, as well as the precursor tapes, well, you guys already know that this is probably my personal favorite game in the franchise. So yeah, no, literally going from like the absolute worst to the absolute best. I don't know how you do that, but well, Far Cry is the only franchise, to my knowledge, that like its worst game was followed up immediately by its best game. I can't fathom that. I genuinely can't fathom that. But anyways, so yeah. Far Cry 2 is a much better game. It's also the most realistic game, which makes sense because, well, this game takes place in an undisclosed part of somewhere around like East Africa-ish in a civil war in an unnamed country. And, well, you're a mercenary trying to find the perpetrator of this conflict, who's called the Jackal, which, well, was recently confirmed, I think like a couple years ago, is the main character, is the same person as the main character from Far Cry 1, Jack Carver. You know, Mr.
Stupid bastard.
Yeah, him, the main protagonist. That's the same guy. So, I guess that kind of means that, like, that's the link between Far Cry's 1 and 2, is it's the same protagonist. And, well, as far as I'm concerned, well, the same protagonist is now the main antagonist for Far Cry 2. Which I think that's pretty cool, because, you know, actually at least somewhat ties in the games, and the way that he's written in this game, this is where they actually started to figure out where they were wanting to go with their antagonists. Because the Jackal is like, he's like so like uncomfortable to be around at points. Because like, you can tell he's like just straight up a madman now. Like, he's just been, you know, well, I don't want to say madman. He's morally gray. Because it's like, yeah, he started this entire, war in this African country, just kind of exploiting a situation that's going on. But at the same time, as you play through the game, you start to slowly notice that he's actually starting to regret doing that. And it kind of shows a bit more of a realistic side. I'm not defending his actions, because he probably murdered hundreds of people, but guess what? The point of Far Cry 2's story is to point out, you did that too. You also killed hundreds of people trying to go after him. So to put this into the Jackal's perspective, it's like, yeah, you were hired by CIA, FBI, whoever the hell. MIB, who knows? Or not MIB, MI6. Not the Men in Black. MI6, that's what I meant to say. Or even the KGB or whatever. So I completely forgot my point. No, okay, here's my point. So it's like, you were hired by these guys, right? And we were supposed to specifically go after me, but you ended up, helping both of these sides in the conflict. And not only do they want your ass, but also, well, you just murdered hundreds of people. How much better are you than me? That's his point. And I find that to be a pretty compelling narrative to tell, which they continued that narrative in a few of the other games. And I do appreciate that. And I don't know, I just sort of like that dynamic. And, well, speaking of dynamic, this game's fucking gameplay, holy shit. The amount of just shit that, like, you can interact with in this game is so just it's so like it's just a testament to just how much you can make an environment so just detailed. Granted, I will give the game this though. There's two problems with Far Cry 2, admittedly. Number one is the fact that like this is the only game in the series where you can't replay missions. That is admittedly pretty dumb. That is unfortunately a huge knock with this game. But also, a lot of the weapons are inaccurate as hell. Not in that they aren't accurate when shooting, but just they are just straight up just not correctly depicted. Like to be fair, this is the same problem with the older Counter-Strike games where like the weapons are actually flipped. Like they made the model, like someone who was probably left-handed made the models as if they were like, holding it with their left hand, but then they realized that they fucked up and well, they eventually had to like flip the gun. So the gun itself is essentially mirrored with a lot of the guns. So it's like, as far as I'm concerned, like, yeah, that's like the one inaccurate thing, but like as far as like the environmental detail, the sort of physics in this game where you can shoot individual branches on trees, burn entire sections of like the grass, like it doesn't just kind of stagnate after a while, it continues to go on. The AI, the enemy AI is arguably some of the most impressive I've seen in any game, where they like, if for example, if they're trying to run over you with a car and you shoot the driver and there's like two guys, either like a passenger or like a gunner, the passenger will just immediately take that and will continue trying to kill you, like running you over. Or here's something else. If you decide to or not decide to, but like if you shoot like someone's like leg or their foot, they don't immediately die. They will like kind of go into a bit of like a recovery system, but they will take cover somewhere safe if you try to if they succeed in like escaping you temporarily. Like they actually use tactics, which is something that I can't say for a lot of first-person shooters, and that to me is so just awesome to see. And it also helps that like there's so many other cool mechanics in this game, some of which I get are a bit more personal preference. For example, the weapon degradation in the game. I know some people hate that shit, but I actually think it adds a bit more both realism to a game, but also just kind of makes you have to tactically think, when should I have to replace these weapons? Like it basically forces you to actually switch weapons and make you think outside of the box. And I like it when a game does that, even for a game that's not a tactical shooter. As far as the malaria, I know some people had issues with it, but if I'm gonna be honest, I never had an issue with it in game, like even throughout my playthrough. So as far as I'm concerned, it was just something that like was more or less just something that came up in story beats rather than like a big problem that had to be dealt with like immediately. I feel like it probably like was brought up like maybe every hour or two. It was not a problem at all. So, and well, of course, the Jackal tapes, the precursor tapes, and as well as the Blood Diamonds, I find those all to be very worthwhile collectibles, as well as the Golden AK being a pretty badass weapon to find. So, and of course, it being set in sub-Saharan Africa is so cool to see. You never get to see games, or rarely you get to see games set in sub-Saharan Africa. Granted, obviously in this case, it's much more of a grim reality, but unfortunately that is kind of what this game was commenting on, is just the unfortunate reality of a lot of those countries, and that still face those problems, even to this day. And just kind of shedding light on that is something that I do genuinely appreciate. So basically, this whole point is to say, go check out Far Cry 2. You will not regret it. If you want a bit more of a gritty, grim look in a first-person shooter, I would recommend it. Though I will say, it does have a very samey color palette. Like, you will be seeing a lot of browns and a lot of greens. So if you want to have, like, there is a patch, go check out PC Gaming Wiki, where if that is something that does bother you, it didn't really bother me personally, but I did eventually apply the color patch. But yeah, there is a color patch on that website. So as far as I'm concerned, like, this is at least my personal favorite Far Cry game. If they ever decide to remaster it, or even just straight up remake it, that would be awesome. Just don't give it the Far Cry 5 or 6 treatment. That's all I ask. Which, knowing Ubisoft nowadays, probably will. Although, if anything with Lost Crown and X-Defiant is to show, is that hopefully they'll start wising up. So, but anyways, enough of me gushing about Far Cry 2. Let's talk about Far Cry 3. This is a lot of people's favorite game. Like, everyone praises Far Cry 3 for being amongst one of the best games of all time. They pretty much called it Skyrim, but with guns. Voss is in this game. And, you know, a lot of people really like a lot of the characters. And truth be told, this is a genuinely really good game. Hell, I even put it, spoiler alert for a video I did last year, I even put it in my top 10 best first-person shooter games, single-player first-person shooter games, or single-player first-person shooter games. Excuse my language. And while yes, I still do agree with a lot of what people say, this being, you know, a very big step forward within the Far Cry formula, it pretty much adding in the like a lot of the hunting mechanics that we would see in like from pretty much this point onwards, the crafting system, the skill tree, which I always do appreciate in games, and adding stuff like the watchtowers from Assassin's Creed games, a lot of collectibles, the marketplace. Like, there's so much that was added in this game, and that's pretty cool. But at the same time, though, while this game did take two steps forward in the series, I do feel like this game did take one step back in several aspects. Because, again, Far Cry 2 had a lot of environmental detailing. And not to say that this game didn't have that either, because this game is still beautiful in its own right. As a matter of fact, it did, like, the, you know, Southeast Asian islands better than fucking Far Cry 1 did. Because, by the way, Far Cry 1's in the Solomon Islands. This is set in basically somewhere between, like, the Philippines and Indonesia. So, a similar region as to Far Cry 1. Far Cry 3. Far Cry 1, excuse me. But I did notice they did make a lot of compromises that I just, at least in hindsight, really don't like. For example, you can't really shoot down trees anymore like you did in Far Cry 2. You can't really have a lot of, like, there's not a lot of that type of environmental detailing in Far Cry 3. They removed a lot of that stuff. They removed the fire spread. They removed the weapon jam. They removed and admittedly they even kind of dumbed down the AI. So, like, admittedly that part kind of disappointed me. That, and also coupled with the fact that, like, while Voss steals the show, easily one of the best villains in gaming history, I will stand on that hill that, like, Voss is such an amazing villain. Like, easily one of the best things to come out of the Far Cry franchise. The problem is that he's not really the main antagonist, technically. If you guys know, you know. And while the main antagonist itself, I'm not going to spoil it for people who want to play through the entire game. While the main antagonist himself is fine, has not nearly the amount of charisma that Voss has, or even like other antagonists like Pagan Min. Like he just kind of feels like, I don't know, just kind of a typical, non-native just asshole who took like advantage of a situation. At least that's kind of how I feel. And also so yeah, which there's that problem, and then there's also the story problem where it's like, I feel like kind of halfway through, it just feels like you're just there just to be there. You aren't really given much of a reason to continue going on your journey kind of halfway through the game. Like, I just, like, the first half of the game, fucking strong. Like, I will fully admit, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, the first half of the game is amazing. Like, fucking 9 out of 10 material right there. But as far as, like, once you're kind of halfway through, like, the story just kind of drops the ball a bit. Like, it becomes weaker. It's not the absolute worst. Well, that ending was terrible. But as far as, although 2012 was a terrible year for endings in general, but as far as I'm concerned, like, it's still like it's still playable. Like, I still have fun playing in the second half. It's just there's a noticeable downgrade in the writing, and I don't know. It just kind of demotivated me personally, at least once I finally finished the game. So that being said, that is nothing to take away from this game. It is still a fantastic game in its own right. Oh, but there's the other problem I just remembered. Ubisoft's bullshit. So all of the DLC that was added in this game, well, because of the shit that happened last year, or was it in 2022? I don't remember. But basically, because of the fact that they tied this game to their Uplay service, you no longer have access to not only the multiplayer, but also the cooperative campaign that came with this game.
Stupid bastard.
So because this game came with a cooperative mode that's actually very similar, like it's a Left 4 Dead style co-op mode, which I remember playing quite a bit, and I thought was actually pretty fun. You can't access that anymore, which there's no fucking excuse for that, especially considering the fact that you can literally play Far Cry 1 and 2's multiplayer, pretty much whenever you want. Far Cry 3, you can't, because they shut down not only the servers for the multiplayer, but also even being able to access it even offline, which is absolutely unacceptable. So, and there's even like some extra DLC that is single player only that you can't access anymore. So, unfortunately, because of those reasons, that actually does taint the experience. But even just putting that aside, you can still have a fantastic time with this game. And as a result, I'm going to put this in the Pagan Min category. I know, Voss is not in the, like, Far Cry 3, the game that Voss is not in the Voss tier. I know. But, admittedly, like, those issues unfortunately weigh it down for me personally, and unfortunately it makes me kind of worried about what is going to happen with Far Cry 4 onwards, because Far Cry 4 also has a ton of DLC. Far Cry Primal has a couple of like offhand DLC. So it's like, granted, the lawsuit that's going on because of what happened with the crew hopefully will push through, especially since Ubisoft is a French company, so, and unlike the US, Europe doesn't tolerate that shit as much, so it's like, but that's a whole other story for another day. But as far as I'm concerned, it's still a good game, it just has issues right now. Maybe there's a way for people to be able to, like, access the DLC more easily. How I knew, like, I was able to get the DLC just fine with, even though, like, the servers for Assassin's Creed 2 shut down. Yes, Assassin's Creed 2 had servers, if you didn't fucking know, even though it was a single player game, but Ubisoft's stupid. But yeah, Far Cry 3, good game. And then we get to Blood Dragon, which... Oh god, okay. Okay, so I'm counting this as its own game because it really is its own game. Yeah, it's marketed as a standalone expansion, but it has literally nothing to do with Far Cry 3. It's only in the name. It might as well just drop the 3 on it and just be called Far Cry Blood Dragon. Hell, I'm probably going to do that whenever I add it on my wiki. So it's like, yeah. But as far as... Okay. Blood Dragon is not a bad experience. I respect the niche that it was able to achieve. Like, and able to just kind of maintain. But if I'm gonna be honest, I just don't really vibe with this at all. Like... Yeah, I'm sorry, guys, but I just don't particularly care. It's not the worst, like, but most of it has to do with the theming. I'm gonna put an end on, by the way. I hate the theming. If you guys know me, like, I can't stand the whole 2010s, early 2020s wave of just forced 80s nostalgia. I absolutely despise that shit so fucking much. Like, granted, there are a few exceptions to that rule. Back there shows you that, but 9 times out of 10, I can't fucking stand it when a game is either set in the 1980s or just inspired by the 1980s, and all they focus on is like the glam shit, the aerobics shit, the new wave, vaporwave shit. I hate that shit so fucking much. I always just have just despised that sort of look. And, well, this game is set in an alternate 2000s where that sort of culture kind of thrived. It's basically, let's just say it's basically, Fallout, but replace the 1960s aesthetic with the 1980s aesthetic. Either way, I don't like. So I can't because of it. Because again, you guys know me. Theming matters to me. Because a game can be like fucking 10 out of 10, but if the theming doesn't, if I don't jive with it, I'm not gonna care. So that being, and it doesn't help that the story is basically just kind of a retelling of that of Far Cry 1's. Like, it's or at least it's very similar to that of Far Cry 1's, which already puts a bad taste in my mouth. It is better than Far Cry 1. I will stand on that hill. Like, it is definitely that. But it's like, I just don't really like I don't like the theming. I don't like the setting. I just don't like... And also, this game just looks very dark at points. Like, it just has, like, moments where it's like, I feel like I have to turn up the brightness because it just gets too dark, which is ironic because you might look at that cover and be like, oh, that's a very bright cover. No, a lot of the game is very dark. Like, it gets hard to kind of like see where the hell you're at. So, but yeah, like, I'm sorry. I know this is a lot of people's favorite, but it's like, I don't care. I don't like the aesthetics, and it continued a lot of the same problems I had with Far Cry 3. So, granted, thankfully this is a standalone, and also it didn't have any DLC, so you don't have to worry like a single bit about like any of that shit. So, I will say the Blood Dragons themselves are pretty cool. I will give the game that. So, but protagonist, not my jive. The antagonist. I can't even remember his name. It's another Doctor character, but you guys already know I fucking hated Dr. Krieger in the first game. I only remember that because of just how fucking terrible. The only reason why I even remember Dr. Krieger is that, like, yeah, but yeah, as far as I'm concerned, no, I'm sorry. All right, let's move on to Far Cry 4, which, well, you guys might be surprised by this, but I really love Far Cry 4. Like, I feel like this game got a lot of shit when it came out, though, because, like, people thought it was just kind of a reskin of Far Cry 3 because it had the same exact guns with a few new added ones, but still a lot of the same guns, and it had the same exact movement, and all that fun stuff. But if I'm gonna be honest, and well, this might surprise people, but I actually prefer Far Cry 4 over Far Cry 3. Like, which I know, like, that's blasphemous for a lot of people. You know, because again, it's Far Cry 3. How can you top that? Well, let's start things off with the setting. This basically takes place in a country known as Kyrat, which is basically like a Nepal or Bhutan, like in that same region, the Himalayas. Hell, it might even be Nepal for all we like care, just kind of split off from Nepal. And to me, that's just a much more interesting setting than like a tropical island in like between the Philippines and Indonesia. It's just, I don't know. I just have always been more interested in, like, that's just a more interesting setting to me. Just a more like Nepalese, Tibetan setting. I just find to be a much more interesting one. Number 2, yes, it has nearly identical gameplay as Far Cry 3, but it does have some quality of life improvements. So, for example, obviously the graphics are going to look better in Far Cry 4 because, you know, this was a cross-gen release. So, because this came out in 2014, so it came out on both 7th and 8th gen consoles plus PC. And so, yeah, it's going to naturally look better. But also, the quality of life improvements include the fact that, like, there's a bit more of an like, you don't have to like go through like a bunch of sub menus in order for you to craft or to sell stuff. Like, there's a sell all button like right there, or like buy all ammo thing like right there. Or the fact that whenever you craft syringes, well, you don't craft syringes. You just need to find the plants and you just automatically make syringes whenever you need them on the go right there. In Far Cry 3, you had to craft in each individual one. So having that sort of like, you know, faster pace of the gameplay actually is a big improvement in my opinion. And, well, this might be controversial. Okay, this is definitely controversial. I kind of find Pagan Min to be... Okay, this is not controversial. I think Pagan Min is honestly at least as good of an antagonist as Voss. At least as good. I know I have it in where he's lower on the tier, but that's only because of iconicism. I think Pagan Min is genuinely one of another amazing villain in his own right, just for different reasons. Whereas Voss is, you know, he's a pirate, he's brutal, he's all about torturing people and all that fun stuff. Pagan Min, he's a dictator of Kyrat, and, you know, he pretty much rules with an iron fist, and, well, he does, you know, some horrid shit himself. At the same time, though, he actually kind of has a point. Like, I don't want to spoil the story too much, because I want you guys to play it for yourselves. But, like, yeah, he's a bit of an asshole, and he's willing to fucking kill anyone who disrespects him. But, like, he is true to his word. Like, he is someone who, like, is probably the most open and honest characters in, as far as antagonist is concerned. He honestly kind of reminds me of the Jackal in that respect, where he's like you kind of at least understand where he's coming from, and you can even at least somewhat sympathize with him. And that is how you write, at least in my opinion, that's how you write antagonists, is that you obviously you don't have to root for them. As a matter of fact, you still want to see you still want to see him defeated, but it's at the same time, you can't help but just kind of appreciate him. And it also helps that he's voiced by Troy Baker, a legendary voice actor in his own right. Just please get out of the NFT thing, I swear to God. But yeah, Pagan Min really does sell this game. And even just kind of besides that, the actual gameplay itself is the exact same as Far Cry 3, just with some quality of life improvements and kind of changing the animals to better fit the environments. They still have the occasional throw off animal, but that's to be expected. And I don't know, I just find this to be the overall better experience. It has better. I feel like it has a better story, because Ajay, I think, is a much better character than Jason Brody. I'm just gonna straight up say it right now. Because with Jason Brody, he has that snooty attitude with him. Granted, he does change over time, and I do appreciate that. I just kind of find Ajay to be a bit more relatable to me personally. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, this might surprise people, but not only do I think this is better than Far Cry 3, but I'm going to put this in the same tier with Far Cry 2. I'm going to put this in the Voss tier, which, again, I know is weird that, Voss, the game with Voss is in the Pagan tier, and the game with Pagan is in the Voss tier. But again, this is just how I personally feel about these games. I really like Far Cry 4. Oh yeah, and also this was the game that introduced the custom map editor, which I don't need I say more? Oh, and also this game has a really good DLC. So, the Yeti, the Mountain of the Yeti, whatever, the Yeti DLC. I keep forgetting. I forgot what it was called. Yeah, that was a pretty cool DLC. Valley of the Yetis, that's what it's called. Really cool DLC. Just Ubisoft, please, for love of God, don't fucking get rid. Please let people be able to access that shit. I swear to fucking God. But yeah, Far Cry 4, really damn good game. I love it. Yeah, what did I say? I fucking love the game. It's a fucking, yeah. I would definitely say that, yeah, even though it has those, downgrades that Far Cry 3 introduced, that Far Cry 2, excuse me, it doesn't have the same dynamic stuff that Far Cry 2 has, and it could just kind of double down on what Far Cry 3 had to offer in that regard. But I do think that, it is the overall better game. So, and it also has a better ending. So I will give Far Cry 4 that. So, alright, well, let's move on, and let's talk about Far Cry Primal, which, this is a game that I remember a lot of people also gave shit to. Which, I mean, this one gets a lot of flack because it basically reused the same exact map layout as Far Cry 4. Which, I mean, yeah, they should have actually put a bit more effort into making a better map. But I find this game to be interesting because this is the only non-first-person shooter in the game. Excuse me. This is the only non-first-person shooter game. This is a straight-up open-world action-adventure game. Or action game, I guess, in this case. Because, well, this game is set thousands of years in the past. Back in the Stone Age. Neolithic Age, actually. So, you're pretty much in the events of pretty much the dawn of man, or at least the dawn of modern man. And that's actually kind of a cool idea. Like, as far as a game set in prehistoric times where you pretty much learn about the, like I said, the beginnings of humanity and sort of experience that, I think this game does it in a really cool way. And as far as like exploration and the wildlife and even the gameplay, I think this game is actually underrated as hell. Like, yeah, like they did their research here. And well, yes, some people kind of get like will probably get annoyed with the fact that this game has no English voice acting. It's all basically just kind of a, I'm pretty sure it's actually technically a made up language, but it's inspired by a lot of what we know of when it comes to Neolithic speech, or PAL even other languages like a lot of the Aboriginal or Sub-Saharan languages, like, because there's, I forgot what it's called, but there was like a tribe in, or not tribe, but like a group of people who lived in Africa who talked with like clicking sounds, where it's like, I can't replicate it, but like they took inspiration from stuff like that as far as creating their languages for this game. And I'm fine with it. I've never was annoyed with it whenever like a franchise had to come up with like a, you know, a new language. I mean, I love Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars is one of my favorite franchises of all time. So it's like, and they both have, you know, they have like new languages. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, that never really bothered me. I guess my biggest complaint about this game, however, is that, well, this was sort of the beginning of when people started to kind of see the bit of the repetitive formula that Far Cry was kind of seeing at this point. Like, they weren't really innovating in a lot of ways. I mean, that was already kind of evident with Far Cry 4, but with Far Cry Primal, like, yes, the act, like them changing the pace from it being a first-person shooter to just a straight-up action-adventure game did help spice things up a bit, but they didn't do quite enough in a lot of people's eyes to change up the formula. I still think the game is still fun to play, and I still respect the hell out of it, but combined with that lack of innovation, or true innovation, I should say, as well as, well, I guess except with the animal companions. Yeah, that's my counter to that, because this game, yeah, you can tame a bunch of animals. You can tame, like, you can tame a wolf, you can tame a bear. Can you tame a woolly mammoth in this? I know you can tame a saber tooth. I do know that. So there's my counter to that. Not only is it changed up the actually, like, it changed up the genre, but it also added those, you know, elements there. So I guess the real genuine knock you can have on this game is the fact that they did reuse the same, like, open world layout as Far Cry 4's. So I will give it shit on that. They should have just made a completely new map for this. Because, hey, Watch Dogs 1 came out came out the same year as Far Cry 4, and Watch Dogs 2 came out the same year as Far Cry Primal. And they had completely different open worlds, and they were also made by Ubisoft, so there's no excuse. So, but yeah, that aside, this is gonna be controversial, but I'm gonna put this in Pagan. I think this game is underrated. I really like this game, like, and you can definitely, like, I think in a lot of people's eyes, this is probably like, you can argue, like, a lot of people argue whether Far Cry 4 or Far Cry Primal are like the last truly good Far Cry games. But I would still say both are quality games. Just with Far Cry Primal, it's just something that like you kind of have to get used to its different style of gameplay because it's much more melee combat oriented, and you also use a ton of like different bow types because you have long bows, you have short bows, you have all that fun stuff. So it's like in slingshots as well. So it's much more melee focus. So just keep that in mind. But it's a change of pace that I do appreciate. So I'll stick it into the pagan tier. All right, Far Cry 5. So, oh god. Okay, so this is a game I actually recently played through, but I did not do a stream on. I played the entire game on my own time, including the DLC. And man, this game does have its defenders, and I'm not gonna knock anyone for that, but I don't know, man. This game has some serious problems with it. So, number one, the premise and the setting. So, obviously, this game was inspired by, the rise. Like, basically, this game was heavily inspired by a lot of, like, militant cults that exist in the United States. Like, and specifically a lot of, like, basically far right, like, religious cults. Like, it should be pretty obvious that this is supposed to be like some, like, Christian dominant cults similar to, like, actually I'm not going to name names, but you get the point. Is that, like, well, I said evangelical, but you get the point. Is that it's kind of based off of stuff like that. And well, you got Joseph Seed being the main face of this particular game here. And I do respect the hell out of the actor who did this, because he did the best he could with the material that he got. But I feel like there's just a lot of issues with Joseph Seed as a character. And just kind of the story that they were telling, if you can even call this a story, because there's barely a story in the game, which is super fucking frustrating. So, and, well, I'm not gonna spoil specifics, but I am gonna spoil general endings. Basically, no matter what ending you go through with this game, Joseph Seed wins. Which is something that, when you play through the game, actually pisses you off. Because it's like, the game treats it as if he was right, but here's the problem. There's one tiny problem with that notion. He's a cult leader who killed probably hundreds of fucking people, and you see their dead bodies all over this fucking place. Kind of. And here's the problem. Like, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem because, Pagan Min, he's probably killed plenty of fucking people in his time. Yeah, but the difference is that with Pagan Min, not only does he have the charisma to kind of back that up, and also, like, the acting chops with Troy Baker, but also, they actually kind of give him a bit of a point. Like, he's someone that you, like, who actually has, not only he kind of offers a different perspective, but he's true to his word, and he proves himself right. Like, he actually has a lot of depth within his character. Joseph C. doesn't have that. He just kind of, occasionally comes in, like, every so often, spewing out some weird, culty shit. Which, by the way, the beginning of the game alludes to the fact that he's bullshitting this in the entire time, and then the game never calls to that. So, way to go for taking advantage of that. Um, and it's just like he just kind of pops in, and does some weird, cult shit, and he just kind of walks away. He doesn't like have a lot of depth. The only depth he has is with his family. But his family are the actual nothing burgers of this entire story. Like, they offer no insight at all. Like, as far as like antagonists, they might as well just be regular ass henchmen for all I care. So, granted, Faith was at least a bit different because she used the drugs, which was kind of cool. But then you go over to his militant brother, who like basically had no character and just is like, he's an asshole, but the type of like asshole character that's just kind of like a dick. Like, he's not like Voss, where like he tortures people and he has the charisma to back it up. He's just a fucking douchebag. And don't get me started on like the other brother, who is obsessed with the word yes. Like, and he tries to make it a very uncomfortable thing, but it ends up being more just annoying. And also the gameplay. So this game has like basically was formatted more in a way, like basically the way in which this game was formatted was more akin to something like Ghost Recon Wildlands or even Assassin's Creed Origins, where you go to specific regions and then pretty much do all the missions in said like region, before like you kind of continue on. And well, that's kind of a big problem of mine because, well, Ghost Recon Wildlands worked with that formula because, well, there were like cutscenes in between every single time you went in between different areas, but also you got to have like a better knowledge of like the backstory of all the members of the Santa Blanca cartel, and like that basically gave you incentive to take these fuckers out. And while yes, there are cutscenes pretty much whenever you do get captured by one of Joseph's family, they aren't that interesting, and those are the only cutscenes in the game. There's no like you don't ever have any other cutscenes outside of like the family, and it makes you so detached to the other characters in the game. And I don't know, it just got super, like, it just felt disconnected. It also doesn't help that the gameplay just does not carry this game at all. Like, you thought that like Far Cry 3 had stripped features from Far Cry 2? Oh my god, Far Cry 5 is stripped even more. Like, it has pretty much like, it has, less like skill tree options. I think it has less weapons. Maybe it's around the same amount, but it definitely doesn't feel as like, the weapons definitely feel a bit more homogenized in Far Cry 5 than even in Far Cry 4, a game that literally took the same exact mechanics from Far Cry 3. And it also doesn't help that, like, again, your only mission, you barely have any story missions. And the story missions that do exist in the game, they're done through just, like, without even any sort of, like, cutscenes. They are told, like, you're pretty much told by just talking to random NPCs. And I'm gonna call them random NPCs because they might as well be. And they do it in the most stagnant way possible. Like, they don't even do the same motions as like Half-Life 2 characters, where yeah, like, there's no cutscenes, but at least they're very expressive. They don't even do that. So it's like the world just feels so bland and just boring, which it sucks because it's like the game itself is so damn beautiful. Like, the American Northwest, like, is such a beautiful, like, and perfect location for like a game like this. And I will say this. This might sound weird, but the best part of this game is literally like not even like the main story or even the main gameplay at all. Like when you're going out, just kind of pretend like whenever you just go out into like the middle of the woods, kind of away from everything, and just kind of doing hunting, that's where this game is actually at its best. Which is ironic because it's like, Far Cry, yes, has hunting mechanics, but it's like it's not really a hunting game. But dare I say that Far Cry 5 is ironically probably one of the best hunting simulators ever. So, like, especially, like, it also helps that, like, this game has stuff like lever action rifles, bolt action rifles, revolvers, like, pump action shotguns. So, like, if you wanted to LARP as a hunter, you can actually do that in Far Cry 5. Granted, that's not really something that I'm personally interested in anyways, but you have the option to do so. So, but yeah, it does pain me to say it, but fuck it. I have to put this in the Joseph category. There's a reason why Joseph's the lowest category. It's because Far Cry 5 is just not a good game. It lacks depth with its story, and the gameplay loop just gets so repetitive after a while. Like, I was actually, because again, I was playing this game, like, basically, like, on Discord, and Goalie was seeing me play, and he just saw how frustrated and just bored out of my mind I was with this game. Like, it actually, it also doesn't help that, like, we have a bit of a thing where it's like we notice that like a lot of video game tropes rely on like a cult story, like pretty much on cult storylines, and this of course being no exception to that, and really does nothing with that other than just like some simple shock value shit that frankly isn't really that shocking to begin with. And that's ultimately the biggest issue with this game, is the wasted potential of its premise. Whereas Far Cry Primal was able to, like, execute its premise really successfully. Far Cry 5's just didn't have like the balls to do it, because it's so obvious what it's trying to like be. It's trying to commentate on far right Christian militias and cult groups that unfortunately are a bit of a problem in the United States. Granted, not nearly to the extent as Far Cry 5. Thank everything for that. But it's kind of commenting on something like that. Oh, and also, okay, speaking of that, this game breaks when you ask one simple question, which they try answering at the beginning, but as you play through, you start questioning it again. When you free a region that's like away from everything else in Hope County, why can't you just send another person to like go to the nearest like other like county? Like, I know at the very beginning, like, they try to kind of call off any sort of like support, because Joseph C is kind of like, oh, they're everything's all right. But then at the same time, it's like, not like, but I have a million fucking problems with that scene, by the way. Like mainly just the fact that like, even after you free one region, why can't you just send like another person to kind of go in and fix that shit? But then also the fact that he looks like he's looking at you being like he looks at you as if he knows that he's bullshitting this entire cult and he's just leading them just for his personal gain. But it's like, it's so fucking frustrating. God, This game frustrates the fuck out of me. Like, it's like you have the premise of a good villain, but you didn't write a good villain. You wrote a shit villain here. Like, oh, I can't stand that shit, man. Like, God. But you get the point. I really don't like this game. Let's move on to Far Cry New Dawn, which, oh yeah, before we do that, DLC for Far Cry 5, Hours of Darkness is okay. The Mars one is fine. And the fucking zombie one is dog shit. Do not play. If there's anything to take away from this, do not play the fucking zombie DLC for, like, Far Cry 5. It's actually one of the worst things I ever played in my life. It's terrible. So, don't fucking do it. Anyways, Far Cry New Dawn. A lot of people's least favorite game in the Far Cry franchise. And, well, there's a lot of reason to that. Number one, just like with Far Cry Primal, it reuses another world. Except they pretty much put even less effort into this because it's literally Hope County again from Far Cry 5. It's Hope County just refiltered with like pretty much like a post-apocalyptic theme. That's literally what this game is. So, yeah, not really like the greatest look in that regard. But then you factor in other problems with this. The second problem being it's solely reliant on literally like the worst ending in the game. Which, Jesus fucking Christ. Again, those endings in Far Cry 5 actually piss me off. I hate the fucking endings in Far Cry 5. And the fact that this game is solely reliant on that ending is pretty fucking pathetic. But as far as I'm concerned, they don't even consider this game canon anymore. Or at least I hope they don't consider. Please don't consider it canon. If it's canon, then Far Cry 6 makes no fucking sense. But anyways, New Dawn. Sorry. So yeah, like as far as like that's already like, you know, the reusing assets is already a problem. But then you also like, and also just being solely reliant on literally the worst ending in Far Cry 5. And then also these antagonists, these sisters, oh my god. Okay, 2019 was like the year of the really annoying like siblings. Cause Wolfenstein Youngblood had literally two of the fucking worst protagonists in any game. Like those, you know, the daughters of BJ Blazkowicz is what you play as in that game. And then some of the most insufferable characters in any media. Borderlands 3. The main antagonists of that game were basically a brother and sister duo where they were basically just parody YouTubers. Kind of like basically they were like YouTube prank channel, like basically like prank YouTubers. And they were not endearing. They were annoying. Handsome Jack would fucking, you know, like put the floor on those two fuckers. And well, Far Cry New Dawn was pretty much the beginning of that trend of 2019 with these two honestly just annoying twins. I don't even remember their fucking names. Like, they were so just insufferable in a lot of ways. Like, granted, they weren't as annoying as those two examples, but they were still annoying. I didn't like them. And it also doesn't help that, like, spoiler alert for Far Cry 5, but you guys already know. Joseph Seed is alive and well in this game, and the game treats it as if, like, he's a good person, which is, like...
Stupid bastard.
Why? He literally killed hundreds of people, like, fucking 15 years ago, and there's plenty of people who are in Far Cry New Dawn who were alive during that time who know of that shit too. So that was the thing that honestly pissed me off the most. Like, is that you didn't even get the chance. You didn't even get the chance to, like, properly give him what he deserved. And this was supposed to be the game that was supposed to fix Far Cry 5. Like, dude, okay. Obviously, okay, this might be a weird comparison, but I'm going to bring it up. Obviously, you guys know I love this particular character over here, right? Roxanne Wolf. She was originally in a game called Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, a game that also had a lot of problems when it came to its story and its gameplay. But guess what happened? They actually ended up fixing a lot of the issues that I personally had with Security Breach with its Ruin DLC. Pretty much, fleshing out the characters that they already had, giving them a bit more, not only personality, but also, guess what they did? They properly redeemed her after being basically one of the main antagonists of that game. And you know what they also did? They also completely retconned a lot of the bullshit that people fucking hated in Security Breach. That's all they needed to do. That's all that Ubisoft needed to fucking do with Far Cry 5 and New Dawn. Like, that's all you needed to do is just make it to where that Joseph Seed was still the antagonist of that game and give him give him the actual proper conclusion that people wanted out of him, instead of him just kind of, getting away with all the shit that he did with no consequence. I don't understand why the fuck they did that. The hell was that? Okay, I thought that was my mic. But you get the point. This game, I mean, its gameplay, I think, is a little bit better than Far Cry 5's. It's not as repetitive, but its story, oh my god, I fucking hate this story. So, that being said, I don't know. I think I'm still gonna have to put this in the Joseph category. It's just, is it better than Far Cry 5 or is it worse? I don't know, man. Like, honestly, you know what? I think I'm gonna put it as worse. Because it didn't do the thing that it was supposed to do, which was fix, or at least sort of retcon, a lot of the shit that was in Far Cry 5. That's all you needed to do. If a fucking mascot horror game can fucking do it, then a AAA developer can do it. What the fuck? What the fuck? I don't get it. I don't. Let's move on. Let's move on to Far Cry 6, which is the final game that it will be on this list. We're not going to be covering the DLC on an individual basis, but we'll just be kind of talking in broad strokes. So, Far Cry 6. So, this game came out in kind of an awkward time. And also, it's actually one of the few times Far Cry released, well, New Dawn, and I guess, never mind. I was about to say, it's one of the few times that, like, okay, a mainline Far Cry game coming out in an odd number year. That's because this came out in 2021, 3 years after Far Cry 5, which was 2018. So this one, okay, this one's a bit of a touchy one to talk about because it's the newest one, but also it's like, this game, a lot of people really fucking hate. Like, I have heard some good things from people when it comes to Far Cry 6, but not too much. Like, but if I'm gonna be honest, I kind of like this game. Like, okay, hear me out. So, with Far Cry 6, it has problems still. Like, I'm not gonna deny that. The fact that this game has the weird sort of RPG element where it's like you have specific gear that makes it to where that's your stats instead of having the skill tree, that is pretty dumb. Like, and that does kind of make things hella frustrating. And as far as like you know, the locales, and again, this is like the same problem I've been saying pretty much every game since Far Cry 3. It's just it still does not have the same detail as Far Cry 2, which people were asking for the past 16 goddamn years. Well, past 12 years, but you get the point. Is that like people like, I know that's not like the biggest deal, and there's way more important things to focus on. But considering that this is a 9th gen release, you would expect to have that level of detail in a game, any AAA game, by this point. But they don't, for whatever reason. So, and unfortunately, this is still just, in a lot of ways, still inferior to some of the other games that we've talked about. That being said, this game has a better locale and a better premise than Far Cry 5. You know, this basically, Far Cry 6 is basically, the story is basically just a Just Cause game, which fitting because Just Cause, I've always found it to kind of be like the third person version of a Far Cry game anyways. So, this story is honestly has a lot of parallels to that of Far Cry 4. You know, the main antagonist, Anton Castillo, obviously played by Esposito, fucking legendary actor who also played in Breaking Bad, as well as the dentist in Payday 2. So he's got the chops to really deliver. And, well, there you go. Like, I find him not only to be a way more interesting antagonist, but also kind of brought back the form of, genuine, good antagonists. Like, I find him to be a way more better written character than Joseph Seed. And, his sort of motivations I find to be way more compelling. And even his son kind of tying into the story. And you seeing his son being very conflicted about, whether or not he wants to kind of follow up on the footsteps of his dad, or if he just wants to be just a better leader or for his country, or shit, even just give the leadership to someone else. Like, that sort of tension I find to be so compelling, and they give time to develop that. And I appreciate them kind of going into that. And this is going to be a controversial take from me, but not only do I like them bringing back the cutscenes, but I actually also kind of like that they made the cutscenes in a third-person perspective this time, similar to that of Far Cry 1. Thankfully not as bad as Far Cry 1, because basically every game from Far Cry 2 onwards, every single game, like, its cutscenes were pretty much first-person perspective, which does work in a lot of contexts, but this was a nice change of pace in terms of telling the story. And as far as I'm concerned, like, at least a decent attempt to kind of change up how they tell their story. And I mean, if I'm going to be honest, this is a bit more of a, again, basically, like, this game, I do feel like, was what Far Cry 5 should have been, as far as, like, presentation. Because the characters are way more, they have way better, like, just kind of vibrant personalities. You're actually playing as a character as opposed to the stupid, create a character that was in Far Cry 5. That was really fucking dumb. And, just sort of that relatability of being thrown into this scenario, um, only for you to be able to just kind of come out on top, is a story that Danny, that's her name. Sorry, I couldn't remember her name. But yeah, just kind of Danny's sort of like, thrown into this scenario. I can genuinely feel for her in this world. Which, speaking of, this is a beautiful world. Even though it doesn't have the same environmental detailings that I wish was in the game, I can't deny that Yara is such a beautiful, beautiful world. Easily, like, the best looking Far Cry game. By far. And yeah, like, and I will even say this. Like, yes, the gameplay is still very it is still like very much similar to that of like a lot of the other games. But I will give credit where credit is due. They at least changed up the formula quite a bit with this game when it comes to its mission design as well as its weapons, because this game introduced a lot of like new tools to mess around with, even more so than Far Cry 4 and 5 did. So I guess just the main problem with this game, I think part of the problem with this game is that this came out in a very bad time. So, because I don't think this is a bad game at all. As a matter of fact, this might be controversial. And I know this is going to be controversial. I'm going to put this in the pagan tier. Not as good. I still wouldn't say it's as good as Far Cry. It's definitely... It's still not better than Far Cry 3. Don't get it twisted. Far Cry's 2, 3, and 4, I still think are better games overall. But I think with a game like this is a step in the right direction for this franchise. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is definitely like... I don't know if it's better than Far Cry Primal, but it's at least better than Far Cry 5 and New Dawn, which is at least a step in the direction in my eyes. I think a lot of people just gave this game a lot of shit because of just the fact that, like, this came out during the pandemic, and as I pointed out in my, in the Caspian Word episodes, as I've talked about with 2021 and 2022, a lot of games on websites like Metacritic, like, and IGN, they got tons of low scores. Nobody liked these games at all. And I'm not just talking about with Ubisoft or even AAA games, but even like AA and even indie games. People were just hammering every goddamn game, and it made, like, even the games that people I heard were good. And it made me super sad, because it's like, there's a quality, like, because it's like, I feel like this is another, like, an example of a game that just got way too much shit. Because trust me, this is not the same quality as like Watch Dogs Legion. I can guarantee you that. Watch Dogs Legion was an objectively terrible game. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was also an objectively terrible game when that game came out. Like, as far as Ubisoft games are concerned, like, shit, Skull and Bones is a fucking joke. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, this game is not that bad. It's not that bad. And, again, I think it's just, it came out during a bad time with the pandemic, but also because of just that formula, people were just starting to think that formula was stale. I totally get it, but I don't think that's enough to justify just saying that this is one of the worst games in the Far Cry series. It's not. So I do think that it is at least somewhere in the middle, which, as you can see, it's right in the middle. Though I do personally like the game, and I'm putting that out there now. And also, this game had some really good DLC. So, or at least from what I heard. I've not played it personally, but I heard a lot of people say that, like, the DLC for this game was really good. So, as far as I'm concerned, this game's not that bad, guys. Come on, don't like. Again, is it like? Is it the best game in the series? No, but like, it's not. Yeah, it's not 5.3 people. My god. Hold on. Let me. Although, to be fair, we have already established the Metacritic reviews are fake, anyways. Or, like, user reviews. So. Yeah, let me check the negative reviews on this. But yeah, like, that being said, like I said, my main problems with Far Cry 6 is the fact that, like, it does have that weird, like, RPG system when it comes to, like, the armor system. I do think that is pretty fucking dumb. Like, that is the one thing I will give this game shit. So. Mhm. Oh yeah, actually I was never really bothered with the ammo switching. Although to be fair, you are talking to someone who was fine with the ammo switching in BioShock, so it's like, but yeah, I don't know. Admittedly, this, like, I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a bad game. And it's nowhere near as bad as like Far Cry New Dawn. Hell no. It's not down in that level. And it's definitely not as bad as Far Cry 1. I will die on that hill that Far Cry 1 is still the fucking worst in the series. So, but either way, that's it. We're done with the Far Cry games as far as talking about them. I might stream some of them in the future, although it's kind of dependent on how I feel because, well, some of them have nudity, but also because they're open world games. I don't know if I'd be able to run them, but I'm definitely open up to the idea of playing at least the ones that are like at the pagan tier up. So, and thankfully, because it's an anthology series, I don't have to worry about playing through all of them for you guys. We can just kind of, talk about them. But yeah, no, that's gonna be it for tonight. And that's another list pretty much added to the collection. So I hope you guys did thoroughly enjoy this. If you guys agree, that's awesome. If you guys disagree with me, that's completely fine. At the end of the day, this is just one man's opinion. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, and let me know in the chat if you're watching this on Twitch. If you guys haven't already, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn on the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon as well. While you guys are at it, check out the links down below as well, specifically the Discord and the SoundCloud. There should be a link tree down below on YouTube for all of my other social media. And if you guys haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button on Twitch to support me directly. If you guys can't do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad the guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream and video to other people as well, and continue to be awesome people in the process. Until then, I'll definitely see you guys on the next tier list. Again, these are going to be more smaller tier lists this time around, so just only about like an hour or two long. But yeah, until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.